Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this very special webinar. It's a pleasure to have you all. My name's Sandi Givens. I'm the General Manager for Informa Connect Academy. I've got the pleasure of having Sandi Givens with us today to talk about a very important topic. What we normally do is we do give a couple of minutes for everyone to join. I know not everyone can make it right on the dot. So just while we're waiting to fill out the room, and we do actually have a really good number of people attending today, so that tells you that we're talking about a really important topic. If I could get some people, or all of you who are currently in the room, if you can, in the chat box, let me know where you're coming in from. And normally I ask this question because we're expecting people from all over the place, but today's a very bit of a special one because I know everyone is tuning in from Victoria, but it would be actually really interesting for us to know if you're coming in from metropolitan Melbourne or if you're in regional Victoria. So if you could do me a favor and in the chat box, just let me know where you're coming in from or tuning in. That would be great. And we'll just go through a few responses whilst we're waiting in for people to come in. So they're coming in thick and fast, Sandi, so that's good. People are paying attention. Excellent.
Yeah. Melbourne,
Melbourne. Yeah. Oh, there's one from Sydney. Oh, let me see who that is. Welcome to that person. Esther, good for you to be here with us. So we've got a couple person from Geelong, mostly Melbourne, obviously. We've got someone from Gippsland. Hey, Marie, welcome. Melbourne. Let's see, Southwest Victoria. Oh, Gulden country. My apologies, I mispronounced that completely. My apologies. Rob from Shepparton. Rob, welcome. What else have we got? Mostly Melbourne. Seaford in Melbourne. So yeah, so obviously as expected, Sandi, mostly from metropolitan Melbourne, but we do have a few from regional Victoria.
And you said there was someone from Sydney, I think.
Yeah, there was someone from Sydney.
Yeah. And the information we'll talk about still applies across Australia, really. And we'll talk about more why this is happening in Victoria. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we'll do, we'll kick things off. So I just want to formally welcome everyone again. My name's Sandi Givens. I'm the General Manager for Informa Connect Academy. We've got Sandi Givens. Before I do a formal introduction, I just did want to go through a couple of housekeeping issues. The two main questions we normally get is, will this be recorded? So the answer to that question is yes, you will get a copy of this, hopefully within 24 to 48 hours. And the other is, will we be taking questions? So Sandi has nicely agreed to take Q&A. But what I would suggest is if you could hold your fire right until the end of the session, we'll go through those questions at the end. There is also a bit of an offer that we have for those that are willing to stick around right until the end for the course that we will be delivering on this topic. So if you could hang around for that, we'll talk about that in a little bit of detail. And there's a special offer to cover that off as well. So we're going to be doing this slightly different to the way we normally do it. We're actually having a bit of a live interactive discussion with Sandi today. So we're going to go through and ask a few different things, and hopefully we'll get some insights on these reforms that are coming into effect on the 1st of December. In terms of, for those who don't know, Sandi is a very long-standing partner that works with us and is a consultant that has delivered many learning and development programs and has also a lot of expertise around the mental health area as well. So I suppose with that in mind, if we go into the first question, Sandi, it's obviously great for you to be here. The question I suppose that I wanted to start off with is with these, psychosocial safety and legislation changes that are coming into effect in Victoria on the 1st of December, can you tell us what's got you interested in this particular topic and how you sort of started to get some interest in this area?
Yeah, I'd love to. Years and years ago, in the early part of my professional career, I was doing a lot of leadership workshops and team building workshops, how to resolve conflicts within teams, etc. And one of the things that struck me on these workshops and even retreats that we did was that there was a lot of stuff that, particularly in teams, had been shoved under the carpet. Things that might have happened 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years ago that had never been addressed. And I started thinking about the potential impact of that on people and their mental health and well-being. In total transparency, I'm comfortable to tell people that I've had experience with depression. I've had 3 major depressive episodes in my life, and I've also lost a family member to suicide. So I have personal experience that fuels my passion and interest about all this as well, to help us prevent people from going through that kind of pain and that kind of trauma in their lives.
Mm, very, yeah, no, very interesting. And so when did you specifically start working in this field then?
Well, I was lucky. I think I got a bit ahead of the curve, really, particularly here in Victoria. Back in 2015, 2016, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, released a report they had done, this massive research they had done around how we could better look after people who have mental health conditions in workplaces. So how do we help reduce the stigma? How do we help them return to work more comfortably, and so on and so forth? And so this term mentally healthy workplaces was born. And I count my lucky stars. I was in the right place at the right time when a national employer here in Australia approached Beyond Blue, which I trust people have heard of before. Beyond Blue is an organization that's been around for about 15, 20 years now, advocating for and providing services to enable Australians to live their best possible mental health. And this employer approached Beyond Blue and said, we've got a lot of staff and clients, particularly in our regional areas of New South Wales, who are really struggling with life at the moment. And we've got the money to take a facilitator around these different regional centres to run seminars on creating more mentally healthy workplaces. But can you find a facilitator and train them up to run these programs?
Mm,
And I got the job. And it was one of the most challenging and yet satisfying projects I've ever worked on. And I came back at the end of that, and I remember saying to Beyond Blue, well, what can we do now? Well, what can I do now? Um, and it lit a fire in my belly about this whole issue of workplace mental health, and
mm,
how people aren't one person at home and another person at work. Like whatever's going on in their world generally is a part of their world when they're in the workplace. And then, of course, with 2020 and COVID coming, a lot of my clients were panicking and contacting me and saying, well, how do I look after people who are now working from home? And how do I help them maintain a sense of well-being and connection with the team? So I did a lot of work in those early COVID years and throughout the COVID years of helping managers come to terms with those kind of issues, which were very new to us at the time.
mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, we hear the terms psychological safety and psychosocial safety. I mean, for the benefit of the audience, are they the same thing?
No, no, they're not. And in fact, most of the time, going back into the late 2010s and early 2020s, the term we heard most often was psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is about when someone feels psychologically safe, that means they feel safe to be their full selves, if you like. And in the workplace, it's when I feel safe putting my hand up and saying, I don't understand, or I'm confused, or even I've got an idea, or oh, gee, I've made a mistake, without any fear of negative repercussions of that from either my colleagues or my manager or somewhere within the organization. So that's what psychological safety is about. Whereas psychosocial hazards or psychosocial safety is a much broader organizational perspective on how do we look at the work environment and identify what are the things that happen in the work environment that could cause mental injury, that could cause harm to a person psychologically or mentally. So psychosocial safety is the preferred OH&S term now to refer to this broader view of what's going on in workplaces.
Got it. So I suppose the critical point here then to note is that basically what we're expecting through these reforms is that it basically employees now have to manage risks to mental injury in the same way they've obviously had to manage risks to physical injury. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, this sort of was really catapulted into people's worldviews a bit more when COVID came along,
Mm,
because we now were dealing with employees who we didn't actually see that often. And when we did, it was through the screen and perhaps very limited time. The other thing that happened was this whole idea of employees feeling like they had to be on all the time, having to answer emails at 9 o'clock at night or all that sort of thing. And so it was almost like a lot of employees felt like the job demands increased over COVID and they didn't have that right to turn off
mm,
work. And, logically, if we stop and think about it, that can create an awful lot of stress, which can actually create mental injury to people.
mm. So that actually then raises the question of, so what are the things in the workplace that can create a mental injury, and how would you define a mental injury?
Yeah, well, and I often say to people, this is not that different to physical injuries. So, because a physical injury can be mild, moderate, or severe. And it's the same with a mental injury. A physical injury impacts somebody's ability to function fully. Again, depending on whether it's mild, moderate, or severe. And it's the same with a mental injury. It's going to impact the way I feel, the way I think, and the way I behave. So the injury itself can be then become labeled as a mental illness or mental health condition like PTSD, anxiety, depression. Um, so they're and lots of research has been done and studies show clearly that, for instance, chronic stress that is poorly managed can definitely contribute to creating a condition for someone to end up with a diagnosis of anxiety
Mm,
or depression.
got it. So I suppose then the critical point here is to then basically raise that employees need a process, I suppose, of systematically identifying and then assessing and controlling hazards in the workplace that could probably lead to psychological harm,
Yeah.
the same way that would apply to physical harm, correct?
Yes. And I didn't answer all of you. I've just realized I didn't answer all of your question, Fussy.
Mm,
And that is, well, what are these things that can cause mental injuries? And there's things that have been around since, the beginning of time. And that is high job demands or low job control, bullying, harassment that is physical, psychological, sexual. It could be poor workplace relationships, poor management of change, low levels of support, both from colleagues and from my manager. And in some industries and occupations, it can be exposure to traumatic or violent events that have a lasting impact on someone.
mm. And one of the, I suppose, because every workplace is different and every manager has a different way of approaching these sorts of issues, I suppose each organization probably needs to develop a system or a process that is all encapsulating. How would an organization go about creating that process or that system, would you say?
Well, to put people's minds at ease and maybe slow their heart rate down a little bit, if we think about how we've done this with physical safety for decades and decades, it's exactly the same. So it's looking at different things though in the work environment. So for instance, starting with consultation, we need to talk to employees, we need to talk to people at the coalface, and find out their perceptions of what is stressful in their work environment, what's working well, what's not. And in that process, be able to identify hazards to their psychological or mental health and well-being. And it's about then moving on to look at what's reasonably practical to minimize or even eliminate those hazards. So third step, so we've got consult employees, then we've got identify the risks, and then we assess, we're using some sort of risk assessment tool. We assess not only the likelihood of the risk happening, but also the consequences of the risk. Because the consequences to something that might happen frequently, the consequences could actually be very mild. Or it might be something that happens more frequently, but the consequences are quite severe of that hazard. So after we've done that, then we need to put in control measures,
Mm,
typically using the hierarchy of controls, which has been around, since 1950s in managing physical safety. And then the final step is to constantly review, because this isn't a one-off process we go through. This is something that needs to be continually refined and continually revisited, because the work conditions and society and people will change at different times.
mm. You referenced the term hierarchy of controls. Just for my benefit and for everyone else listening, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, there's the hierarchy controls, as I said, was developed in the 1950s, particularly to look at how we minimize or eliminate these physical hazards. So the highest level of control is, in fact, elimination. That's the most effective. So in the case of physical safety, it might be, oh, we've identified we've got some faulty equipment here that's posing a high physical risk to our workers. So we're going to get rid of that equipment and replace it with something that has a better safety rating or something's newer that is better for our workers. The next level is substitution. So again, in the physical environment, it might be again, that replacement with something newer or having a higher safety standard. Um, Isolation is the third level of control, and that's where it might be, uh, say, and this is typically, we think of construction areas and mining and some of those kind of professions and industries. Um, Isolation might be putting up barriers to keep workers away from certain substances or equipment that is highly dangerous. And then there's administrative controls, which usually refer to things like training programs or making sure proper policies are in place, but particularly about safety training. And then the lowest level of effectiveness and the fifth level of this hierarchy is PPE, or personal protective equipment. So in the physical work environment, that's things like safety glasses and hard hats and high-vis vests and those sort of things.
Got it. So to summarize, basically, you've talked about five levels of risk management: so elimination, substitution, isolation, administrative controls, and then PPE.
Yeah.
How would you then apply this to psychosocial risk management, especially at the PPE level?
Yeah, it's that's a great question, because we kind of go, well, hang on, how do I put up barriers to bullying? And that's obviously not quite so straightforward, effective. So we start with elimination, which is, as I say, the most effective level of control. That's about looking at potentially redesigning workflow and work processes so that that hazard does not exist. That psychosocial hazard does not exist. So it might be the hazard of extremely high work demands. And we go, okay, how can we redesign this work to spread the workload out across many more employees or even different teams so that it's eliminated from being this high risk hazard. Um, then if we look at substitution, substitution might be things like adding more flexibility to work hours, or it might be building in more rest breaks for people. And I'm thinking particularly of people in high pressured situations like call centers, and especially if they're dealing with highly agitated, angry customers. So we could say, well, we're going to build in more rest breaks so that it's not this constant barrage of anger that people are being exposed to. Isolation, that third level of control, could include things like job rotation. So maybe up until now, I've worked full time, 8 hours a day in this call center role. Whereas now we start to do some training in the organization. So I can also do another role in another department. It might be marketing, or it might be supporting the sales team, or whatever it might be. But we start to be able to rotate the roles so that I'm getting isolated, if you like, from that potential hazard. Administrative controls include training, like it could be mental health first aid training that is offered to people in the organization. I mean, my personal soapbox is I think everyone in an organization, just like think of how many people have done first aid training,
Mm,
and know, oh, okay, that looks like a broken arm. I know what to do.
mm,
Well, I think mental health first aid is just as important. So under administrative controls, it could include things like training. It could also include things like checking that you've got solid policies in place that are followed up by solid actions. So it's no good just having all these things in paper that sound good, but we actually have actions and KPIs perhaps for our leaders that show us they are demonstrating the implementation and the actioning of those policies. And finally, we're down to the PPE level, which sounds like a weird thing for psychosocial risks, but it could be things like mental health awareness training for the whole organization. It could be making sure that you have a good, reputable EAP, or employee assistance program, in place, and that all of your employees know about it and feel comfortable accessing that.
mm,
I don't want to dismiss that as being not useful, because those things are very useful. Why it's the least effective, though, is that it's not addressing the root cause. So I might want to, as an employee, access my EAP, and I get some counseling and I get to get things off my chest, but the root cause is out there in my work environment.
mm.
And so it's only going to have a moderate level of effectiveness there.
Yeah, got it. So then, Sandy, so then tying these concepts together with the legislative changes that are coming into effect on the 1st of December in Victoria, what can employers do to be compliant between now and then?
Well, I could tongue in cheek say, come to our training program next month, because we'll help you sift through that. But we'll talk about that before we finish today. The interesting thing to me is that some employers in Victoria, and I know some of my clients have contacted me, going, "Oh, help! Oh, this is happening," and I sort of get them to take a deep breath and say, "This has actually been happening in all other areas of Australia, except Victoria, for the past 4 to 5 years, maybe even up to 10." So going back to that 2015, 2016 PwC report I mentioned earlier, at that stage, the OH&S laws kind of said to employers, look, it'd be a really good idea if you could not only look after the physical safety, but the mental safety of your employees. And it's something you should do. But it wasn't, it was kind of a recommendation. And over the past, as I say, 5, 6, 10 years, other states and other areas of Australia have slowly built that into their OH&S laws. And I wonder if the other states kind of laugh at Victoria, because we're the last one to cross the finish line. And that's what was announced earlier this year, that as of 1st of December, it is now going to be legally mandated that employers must look after the mental safety of their employees just as they do the physical safety. I mean, the ethos, if you like, of physical safety in work environments has always been somebody gets up, comes to work, and goes home, and they're just as well and healthy as they were when they left home this morning. They might even be healthier because they've been involved in engaging work and in a very psychologically safe team environment, and so on and so forth. And they feel challenged and motivated in that work environment. Same thing for mental health. They leave home, they come to work. Are we sending them home healthy? And so now, with the changes in Victoria, it's a legal responsibility of employers to be proactive in looking at preventative measures. I mean, For a lot of employers, it's going to be starting at looking at, well, what's going on? What's happening in the work environment that could be causing risk to mental injury in our workplace. But it is ultimately about putting preventative measures in as well. Employers are now going to be required to be able to demonstrate and prove that they have consulted with employees, that they have talked with as I say, the people at the coalface, and helped engage them in this consultation around identifying the psychosocial hazards in their work environment. And I know here in Victoria too, there has been increasing recruitment to be health and safety inspectors on behalf of our regulator, which is WorkSafe Victoria. And so there are lots more inspectors, and there's going to be a lot more workplace inspections.
Mm.
And employers are going to need to demonstrate that they have these things in place, that they are identifying and managing the psychosocial hazards in the workplace.
Very good. I might now give or bring in the audience to come in and ask any questions that they may have about that, because it obviously segues quite nicely. And whilst I wait for people to potentially put their questions into the chat box or the Q&A box, so there's two options at the bottom of the toolbar for most people to be able to raise their questions. I did want to bring and segue to you raise the point about the training course that we are doing, Sandi, and as a thank you for people attending this webinar, we are actually offering a 10% discount off the standard registration fees. But we are obviously doing a training course to enable employers and organizations to understand and prepare more thoroughly for what's happening or about to come through on the 1st of December. So that course is running on the 6th of November in Melbourne. And what we're actually doing, and happy for you to talk about this a little bit more if you like, Sandi, but basically it's a one-day course plus a half-day follow-up coaching session. So that will take place on the 20th of November, with the first actual full day of training on the 6th. But if you are interested in registering, or if you've got any follow-up questions, or you need more information, my colleague Sushil Kumar is available to answer those for you, and his contact details, as you can see, are at the bottom of that title slide. So please feel free to phone him or send him an email, or send us an email on training@informa.com.au. So whilst we're waiting for people to put in their questions, I suppose the most obvious question then, Sandi, is what is the benefit of people coming to this training course, and what can they expect to get out of it?
Oh, gee, where do I start? The first thing I'd say is I don't know about other people who are on the line today, but here in Victoria, there has been this plethora of information being shot out on the internet now. You see it in LinkedIn and on Facebook and all sorts of places. And one of the things I think is a really good reason, one of the reasons I think that people would benefit by coming to the program is I'm distilling all that for you. I know everything that comes into my inbox. I go, oh, this is something new. And I look at it and I go, oh, no, it's the same thing that's just been put out by another person or another organization. So we're distilling it down to what you must know. Secondly, it's a very hands-on program. And by that, I mean, I might talk about something like psychosocial hazards. And we'll talk about, okay, low job control. I want to give you a few minutes to think about where in your organization or in your team you think your employees might have that sense of low job control. Where might you have managers or supervisors who are micromanaging them? And they're going to be worksheets for people to write things down. Ultimately, what we're leading up to in the program is an action plan of who do I need to talk to when I get back to work? What do we need to do? How are we going to do it? How are we going to start these consultations with employees? How do we choose the employees who are going to be part of our focus groups, if you like, around all this? So at the risk of using a hackneyed phrase, people will go away with an action plan. And that's a large reason we're having this follow-up session. Yeah, I know we're calling it a coaching session, but it's also going to be peer coaching. So in the program that we do in person together, you'll work a lot in small groups as well, because I don't have all the answers. I've got a lot of knowledge, and it's amazing to me how much people learn from each other in these programs as well, even if you're from very different industries or quite different professions. Um, so when we get to the half day online, the idea is that everyone can show up with their action plan. Tick, I've done that. Tick, I had that. Oh, I hit some roadblocks with this one. I don't know how to overcome those. Anybody got any ideas?
Mm.
And in small groups, it will go into breakout rooms and I'll monitor all of those and we'll work through those roadblocks and we'll get to the point where people feel absolutely confident in moving towards this December 1st deadline. And I'm not for a minute suggesting the inspectors are going to be knocking on every employer's door on the 1st of December. Um, but you'll feel equipped and ready to go. One of the things that just hit my inbox today was the new code of practice here in Victoria, put out by WorkSafe Victoria. And people have been hanging on receiving that because this code of practice says here's specifically what you need to do as an employer in Victoria. It's almost 150 pages long, or 120 pages long. So I don't want people to have to read all that. Come along and let me put it into a context that's easily digestible.
Mm. Sounds excellent. I do have a question. I've actually got a few, so we'll go through these. First one is from Angus. He wants to know what is an appropriate time period to review identified control measures.
Oh, okay. Well, that would be a good thing to ask your employees. I mean, minimum, I'd say once a year, but it very much depends. A lot of organizations have seasonal pressures. All right. So, for instance, retailers at the moment, we're coming into the Christmas season and the big purchases season, blah, blah, blah. And so it might be identifying those peak periods in your business and saying, okay, we have two peak periods every year, and we're going to review within 4 weeks after a peak period has finished. So it does depend a bit on your industry, the type of work that's done, your workforce. And it's made me realize too, Fussy, another part of this is that any contractors you use in your organization are also covered by these laws.
Mhm.
So again, when you have a high peak season, you might bring in extra temporary staff in form of contractors. And you're legally required to look after them as well, their physical and mental safety. So Angus, I can't give you a definitive answer. Broad brush answer is minimum once a year, potentially more frequently than that, depending on the nature of the work.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's a good point. Obviously, it's possibly horses for courses, but yeah, absolutely. The next question, Sandy's raised by an anonymous person. So the question that they're asking though is, what are the potential mental health and physical hazards of working all day online? So, for example, scrolling through hundreds of complex essays in a tight time frame, considering commenting on and marking them, could this expectation constitute a hazard?
If it's all day, every day, if there's no breaks built in, if the employee isn't sitting at a height adjustable desk. I mean, standing desks have become very popular now. Ergonomic furniture. Um, is it being done in a noisy environment or a quiet environment? Is this person allowed to listen to nature sounds or relaxing music? Does that help them get through this constant stream of reading and evaluation that they have to do? You really have to look at, again, the bigger context of the environment in which this work is being done. And I'd say I mean, from what little I understand of the context from the question that's been asked, I'd say it is a high risk um, hazard in that it's the question itself sounds very intense and very full on, like high job demand and keep your head down and keep going all the time. Yeah, so if the person who asked it could maybe add to that, explain it a bit more in another comment to us, maybe I could help a bit more. But on the face of it, I said, yeah, that sounds like it could substantiate a high psychosocial risk of some sort.
Mm, very interesting. Let's see. Hopefully, they do provide a little bit more context. But in the meantime, Jessica has a question. So she's asking regarding consulting with employees during the hazard identification stage. I'm aware of people at work that use surveys as a useful tool, but how do we navigate workers where English is the second language? Is a focus group where an employee can provide verbal translation? Can that be appropriate?
Absolutely. That's a really great insight to have, being thinking of, going and thinking about your actual workforce and their level of comfort and ease with the English language, or if it's their second language. Also, what's culturally appropriate for them. Um, and that could include things like if I'm a woman in my culture, I don't speak up much when there are men in the group as well. So maybe you need to have separate genders in some of your focus groups. Um, I'm not aware that that survey that you referred to, which is a very good one, or very lengthy, but very good. Um, I'm not aware if that's available in other languages, but certainly it's worth asking the question about can it be made available in other questions, so in other languages, and you could ask that question where you found that survey, people at work. And people with this survey, the person's talking about is freely available to anyone and any employers who want to use it. My biggest concern with it would be is that it's actually administered ethically and with some high level of psychological safety around it. Because the questions are really good. This is, how much it asks straight out, how much bullying happens in your department?
Mm,
Well, if I don't feel psychologically safe, I'm going to say, oh, no, not much. So just giving people a paper survey or getting them to do it online, it's we've got to look at the broader context in which we are asking people to complete that survey.
mm,
Um, Again, I'm not sure if that addresses the question or not. And maybe within your organization, you could arrange for an interpreter or get a contract translator who could translate it into another language that you need.
mm. So Jessica has come back with a comment that I think she believes that the survey is English only.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then coming back to the other person that was asking about the tight timeframes and marking complex essays, their follow-up comment is firstly, thank you for the response.
Mm.
I'm wondering what the existing research is, if any, around health risks of constant screen engagement in your employment and actual physical act of scrolling. I'm also wondering that although this no doubt outside the bounds of this forum, as to how AI use and decisions around it might also be considered in relation to psychosocial hazards.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that it's a bit out of our bounds today. It's out of my area of expertise. I'm not aware of any research that's been done specifically about that. I'm trying to imagine how the use of AI could be a psychosocial risk, other than if people are either of their own volition or are being encouraged to use AI pretty exclusively in terms of doing research or gathering information or whatever, it could be very isolating for someone. We definitely we're definitely losing social connection the more we use tools like AI. Um, the impacts of scrolling, I think that's more likely to be a danger to physical health in that I mean, I'm often saying to my son and his wife, you guys are going to have arthritis in your fingers, doing because they don't care about that. They're 30 something and arthritis is decades away. But I look at so many people on the trains and trams, public transport, they're bent over all the
Mm,
time in accessing their devices. So I would think it's more of potentially a physical injury that can come as a result of that than a psychological or mental injury.
mm. Really interesting point. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I've got a couple of questions from Cynthia. Cynthia is asking, can exit interviews be used to collect data for identifying risks? And what specific questions could be asked at an exit interview to identify psychosocial risks?
Well, absolutely. I think it could be a very reliable source. Um, and again, we've got to look at what's this person's work history with the organization, how long they've been there, how uh, what's been their relationship with their colleagues and their manager. I mean, some people will leave a job because they got a big chip on their shoulder. And sadly, they're going to take that big chip to the next employer as well. So, looking at maybe taking the answers, depending on the person and their history with your organization, looking at taking their answers with a bit of a grain of salt. But it could be quite illuminating to find out that, oh, I didn't know, just straight up ask the questions. And you could even put it on a scale. To what degree do you believe there is any form of harassment going on in your area of the organization or in the organization as a whole? When using scales, by the way, Fussy and all those on the line, I always encourage people to make it an even numbered scale. Like if I say from 1 to 5, people often pick 3, or 1 to 10, I'll pick 5
Mm,
because it seems like a nice middle ground. And I'm
mm,
not really committing to saying, oh, it's really bad, or it's pretty okay. So I'd give people a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is great, 3 is good, 2 is not good enough, and 1 is terrible.
mm,
I think you're more likely to get useful information if you want to do things by scale. And even just asking the questions upright. To what degree did you feel a sense of autonomy in the way you did your job? To what degree did you, or on average, what percentage of time did you have a sense of extreme work overload in your role here? Um, Measuring that on a 4-point scale, how would you define the level or degree of overload? Was it a 4, 3, 2, or 1?
mm,
Uh, what sort of factors within our work environment impacted your ability to mentally be as productive as you could be in your role here? I think
mm,
open questions are good ones. Questions that begin with what, how, or why. Why might people find it hard to deal with the stress in the work environment here?
mm.
Is that hopefully that's helpful to the person who asked the question.
Yeah, hopefully, Cynthia, if you can come back and let me know, that'd be good to know. Uh, I hope that you've got, so Cynthia very quickly did say that was very helpful. So there you go.
That's good. That's
Thank you,
good.
Cynthia, much appreciated. You're okay to go a couple more, Senia, there's
Yeah.
just more. This one's from Chaitanya. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. She says, hi, Sandy, will you please give some ideas of control measures for reporting psychological incidents? Is it good to develop a new incident form for psychological incidents?
Yes. Well, and when you say a new form, I don't know what forms you use at the moment for your physical incidents, but it's important that the form reports, particularly looking at the assessment of risk. And the assessment of risk is always looking at the likelihood of something happening as compared to the consequences of something happening. So again, something with a high likelihood of happening, but a very low consequence may not be where you put your highest priority. It could be something with a moderate likelihood, but severe consequences. Um, Sorry, could you just read the question again,
Yeah,
Hussey? I'm not sure I've answered it
absolutely.
fully.
Yeah, absolutely. So she's asking, will you please give some ideas of control measures for
Hmm.
reporting psychological incidents? Is it good to develop a new incident form for psychological incidents?
Okay, well, I think I've talked about the form.
Mm,
I think with the psychosocial hazards and reporting those incidents, it definitely needs to look at that likelihood versus consequence kind of dynamic. Um, I think it's also good to look at maybe your form includes things like the hierarchy of controls. So, in regard to this hazard, this incident that has occurred as a result of this hazard, what can we do to eliminate it? What can we do to um, uh, create some substitution for it, isolate it? Um, Sorry, I've gone off screen now. The administrative controls and the PPE. Like remembering that the higher up you are in that level of 5 hierarchy, the more effective the control is going to be. So your form might include that. At which level of control can we start our intervention to minimize and or eliminate the risk? The other thing that brought to my mind with this question was in physical safety, we often talked about it's important to report the near misses. So the near misses could be someone tripped slightly over a cord in the workplace that wasn't taped down, that wasn't, the hazard of that wasn't eliminated. So it was a near miss in that they tripped, but they didn't injure themselves. But we still need to report that trip. I'd look at your work environments as well for where are the near misses happening. And by that I mean looking at, when you have team meetings or town hall meetings or whatever, what's the, and I had to use the word vibe, but what's the feeling in the meeting? Is the meeting allowing all people to contribute equally as they choose? Or is the meeting typically always driven by the same 5 outspoken people? And what's happening to the other 3 or 5 or 10 over here that frequently don't contribute anything? And looking at, well, why aren't they contributing? What's causing them to hold back? It might be that they feel, well, I had nothing to add, or I actually just nodded because I agreed with that idea that so and so shared. But we don't know till we ask the questions. It gets back to making sure I'm creating the right context in which I ask those questions. So not out in an open office plan, but say, hey, um, you know, can we go for a walking chat? Well, let's go outside, get a cup of coffee, and just walk around the block or walk down the street. Got a couple of questions I'd like to ask you. No pressure about them per se, but just curious to know what you're thinking. What your thoughts are on it. Um, as an aside, that as I gave that example, Fussy, I thought of when my son was a teenager. And if there are any parents on the call who either have teenagers or have been through those teenage years, I couldn't get anything out of him. I thought, why is he not talking to me anymore? But I found if we went for a drive in the car, because we didn't have eyeball contact, oh, we could just chat. You know,
mm,
we're both kind of looking out the window, things like that. So some of these conversations that we have with your employees around this whole area of psychosocial risks might be more effective and provide more accurate information when we do everything we can to reduce that sense of intense pressure about it, um, which could help lead to people feeling kind of intimidated and on the hot seat and that sort of thing. Um, so making it as relaxed and casual and informal, and maybe, purposely avoiding eye contact a bit like I am now.
very good. I think that is all the questions, unless someone would like to ask a last minute question. But we'll give them a couple of minutes for that to happen. But in the meantime, I do want to take this opportunity, Sandy, for taking the time to be with us and being so open and transparent with your knowledge and sharing your insights with everyone today. It's been fantastic to sort of have this conversation with you. And obviously, we're entering a critical phase for everyone that is looking to be compliant in relation to these new legislative changes. And Narelle just wanted to say that that has been really helpful. So thank you, Narelle, for passing that on as well.
I'm glad.
So likewise, I agree with Narelle on that one. I don't think there are any other questions, so I think
Well,
we'll
if I could add a final note,
of course.
Darcy, um, when you asked the question about why people should come to this training program, the lighthearted answer that popped into my head was because it's going to be a conversation, not a preach and teach session. But that's my style, and I hope people have gotten a sense of my style from this time online together. It will be a conversation. It's not going to be me standing at the front of the room saying, here's what you've got to do, da, 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 because I don't know your world. I don't know your organization and the context in which you're operating. And the more I learn about that as we work together throughout the day and following up on the online session we have, the more I can contextualize my responses and my knowledge to share with you about that. So it's a very relaxed environment that I have in in the workshops that I run. And the final thing I'd say is I remember back in 2016 when I was going around the New South Wales countryside talking about mentally healthy workplaces. One of the messages I shared was, this whole idea of creating mentally healthy workplaces. There are three cases, compelling cases as to why we should do this. And in the case of Victoria, and I think they're still true now, and certainly in Victoria now, looking at this December 1st deadline, there is the legal case. There is the case that, well, as employers, we've got to comply with the legislation now. There's also the business case. And by business case, I mean the cost to your business of not doing this. And I'm not just talking about fines. If an inspector comes in and finds that your policies aren't compliant and that sort of thing, I'm talking about reputational damage, brand damage. I'm talking about the lost productivity. The PwC report showed the actual cost to business, and they did it across lots of different industries, of not managing mental health issues in the workplace was huge. And that for every dollar invested in a mental health initiative, the return on investment on average was $2.10. So we've got the legal case, we've got a business case that includes dollars and cents reasons for doing this. And the third case, which is one that's close to my heart, and that is the people case, the human case. That when people go to work, they don't go to work to get injured, be it physically or mentally. And people deserve to and have a right to come home as healthy as when they arrived at work in the morning. And as a society, let's come together and do all we can to enable people to function at their physical and mental best. So thank you for letting me have that final little pitch from my soapbox, Darcy.
Well, I think that there's no finer point to finish up on. I think, Sandy, especially on that last one in particular. So thank you again for your time, and thank you again for everyone that has attended this webinar. Hope you found that useful. We do hope to see you at this training course. And again, if you did like to inquire about attending, please reach out to Shashil, and the information is at the bottom. But with that said, thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you again on the next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.